players come here to the ITRC to get trained, they always are something there, I need to fix my timing. We always hear about timing. What is timing, Kim?
Yeah, I think I used to be one of those players. I was constantly worried about, I'm out of time, I'm out of time. And timing, I think, is sort of the synchronization between your swing and your footwork.
And every player has a unique timing for consistency. Is there one that's better than another?
Not at all. It's okay to have what we used to call early timing, and it's okay to have late timing. And we used to have concerns about that and what today's game or the current game, what was necessary in that era.
So they used to have, like, they had early timing, they had late timing, and then they had textbook timing. So that's what the books always had. So everyone was trying to get to textbook timing, and it didn't fit most of the population.
No, it doesn't suit everyone.
So we've actually come up with a new way to measure timing, a little bit more accurate. It's called the L and R. You want to kind of explain what it is?
Sure. The L stands for leverage timing, N for neutral, and R for roller timing.
Now, the leverage used to be like we used to call late, but a lot of people thought late, that doesn't sound good. So it's still the same place. It's just a name. And then the N or neutral is what used to be called textbook.
Right.
Now the R is what?
Roller timing. So almost what we used to refer to as early timing. And something that, I think similar to late timing was something that you encourage people to stay away from. You didn't want to have early timing. That would just, you couldn't generate any power. It was kind of the myth that came with that.
Yeah, and we found that a lot of your higher end players actually have what we call the R, or the early timing, but so many players want to get later and they think that's what you have to do to hook the ball, and that's not the case.
Not at all.
So how do we measure it? We'd say an L and R, but now we have numbers.
Right. So I think that the first thing that we need to find with the player is when their slide actually comes to a halt. When they cease going forward on the approach, we want to kind of indicate or determine where the ball is at that point. Is it behind them, at their ankle, or in front of them?
So it's measurable. Where we're doing when they stop the slide at that point where the ball is, and if it's behind them, we call it an L. If it's in front of their ankle, we call it an R, and if it's at the ankle, we call it an N. Now we have L1, L2, L3. Can you explain that?
That is, so if they're an L1, we'll say that that's one ball width behind their ankle, and L2 would be two ball widths, and so we sort of measure it out based on the circumference of the ball and how many away or in front of their ankle they would be.
So it's a much more accurate way to measure the timing and make comparison and change timing instead of saying, well, you're early by a half a step or you're early by a quarter. It's actually a measurable that we can actually apply from one bowler to another. All right, let's take a look at Mike Fagan on the guy's side. And as you can see, the ball's coming down. He's still sliding.
Still sliding. And I guess if we stop it right there, we'd see kind of similar to what we see on the women's side, more of a neutral position in timing.
So we don't see a lot of women beyond this point. Neutral's probably the closest we're seeing right now. On the guy's side, we're seeing more because if we continue on, his foot is still sliding and the ball's still going down the lane. And again, we want to relate it to when the foot actually stops sliding. And it looks like it's right about there. His foot has stopped sliding, so that's quite a ways out on far the lane. What would you kind of call that?
It's almost like an R3.
Could actually be a little bit more, but yeah, an R3 looks pretty good. Let's take a look at some other guys. Now let's take a look at some of our men players on Team USA. Generally, they're referred to as high rev players, having a lot of power, and the conception out there in the field all the time is that they're on the old term late, our new term leverage, but be able to be a cranker high rev player that you needed to be late.
Yeah, I was guilty of that. I think until pretty recently, that was kind of the way I taught. I would, go into the spiel about, today's game, you need to have late timing in order to generate any leverage and good power. But, as we've studied this here at the training facility, we're seeing that that's a little bit of a fallacy. And we can see, we have Tommy here, and he's one of the more high rev players on the PBA. And we look at his timing, he's leveraged, and he's probably a leverage, we were saying he's about a leverage 3.
Yeah, so he fits the mold that we always had, that always, you had to be the cranker, the high rev player, that you always wanted to be a leverage or a late player. But it's not the case of all players. And let's take a look at Chris. Chris is a straighter player, but he is a higher rev player.
Right, and I think, again, one of Chris's, the strengths of his game is that he's got all of this versatility. He can, hook the ball and go a little bit straighter, and we look at his timing, and he's what we would call a roller player, probably roller 3, and at the same time able to generate an equal amount of revs that Tommy has.
So we have almost finish position timing, complete opposites. We have an L3 and an R3. But people would not believe that you could hook the ball with that early or the R timing. And let's take a look at one of the young guns that's here. Has come up from the youth ranks. It's actually on the Team USA now too. Marshall, what does Marshall have?
Marshall's a neutral player, and again, like you were saying, one of the best players and youth players in the world. He's been winning everything of late, and again has some versatility. And we look at he's right at the ankle.
So we used to call that textbook timing, right?
Right.
So again, it's going to be based off your body type, your body style. There's not going to be a right or wrong. You just want to be consistent. Kim, now let's take a look at Emily and look at the finish position and take a look at her timing. And as you can see that she's still sliding as that ball's swinging forward.
Right. And the thing about Emily, and I think as we've gone on and on over the years and have encouraged players to get later with their timing, or what we would call later with their timing, more leveraged with their timing, and the hopes that it would give them a little bit more power, you find that almost all women tend to be surprisingly have more leveraged timing than what we're seeing with some of the men.
Yeah, the theory used to be that women were always early and men were late, and we're finding it just the exact opposite.
Right.
So Emily, as her foot stops sliding, ball is right there at her ankle, so we call that a neutral timing. Now, if the ball was out here in front, a couple of ball swings, and that's where she used to be before she stopped sliding, then she would actually be an R2. So you can, over time, adjust your timing. Try to get in more of a balanced position, more of a leverage position, more of a power position. Be able to adjust over time, but knowing where you're at is important. So let's take a look at a couple other women on Team USA 2012 and look at their timing at the finish position.
Right. The first player that we have here is Josie Ernest, one of our younger collegiate hotshots that's been on the team the last few years. And Josie's definitely more of a neutral timing type player. Again, and when we look at just more of the modern day or the younger generation of players, whether they're power players or a little bit more straighter, we're definitely seeing this change in the timing.
Yes, and they've worked at it. They're getting the ball started in the swing earlier so they can actually get more in that neutral position, because that's what the generation of the bowling balls that we're using now, they want you to get the ball through the front but still have the reaction on the back. Next over we have Deandra, and Deandra has been on Team USA for a number of years. She, I think, actually owns a record now for how many consecutive years that she's been on Team USA, and she made it again here on 2013. She won the Queens last year. She is more what we would see on the contemporary of the ladies, that she's got more leverage timing.
Definitely. She, that foot's come to a stop, and the ball still has quite a ways to travel before it gets off her hand. And no right or wrong, just what she does effectively.
Posture, upper body posture, generally is going to be more upright. If they get a lot of knee bend, it's still going to be the hips going to be down, but the upper body posture is going to be more upright because of the leverage timing.
Exactly.
And next we have over here is Tammy, and Tammy is actually, as on the ladies' side, would be one of the higher rev players.
Yeah, definitely one of the more higher revolutions and more of our power player of the generation that, when we still had a women's tour that was out there. And Tammy, we look at her posture, she's a little bit more forward than, say, Deandra, but definitely she's more like an L1.
Yeah, so she just slightly stops sliding just before the ball gets angled, so it's going to be an L1, but again, the upper body posture is definitely going to be a little bit more forward. Now that we looked at several high-end players and their unique timings, is there a timing that's perfect for everybody?
Not at all. I mean, I think, it's personal, like ball fit and roll, all of those things. What's cool about our game is that you can do it so many different ways and be successful.
But the key is we want to be able to repeat it. I mean, the key for timing is consistency and repeatability.